That looks pretty scary, right? The world of anti-vax conspiracy theories, specifically ones believing vaccines cause autism, is messy as hell. It's a tangled web of science, the media, and disability rights, but at its heart, it's an ongoing story of ableism, love, and hope. So you may ask yourself, well, how did we get here? This is going to be pretty wild, so let's give it a shot. It starts in April 1993. Andrew Wakefield, a gastroenterologist, has just published a big paper claiming measles virus has been photographed in the intestines of multiple patients with Crohn's disease and may be the cause of it. He came to this conclusion, by his own account, by reading a virology textbook and noticing similar symptoms. Despite virologists informing Wakefield the stomach was sterile and would destroy the measles virus, Wakefield continued his research and started speculating measles vaccines could be the cause. In April 1995, Wakefield published a paper claiming Crohn's disease was 3 times more likely in people who have received measles vaccines. The results of this paper was taken from follow-up interviews from the participants of 2 child health studies from the 1950s and the 1960s. Wakefield did not claim the measles vaccine caused Crohn's disease, merely that it may increase the chances. Peer reviews of the paper pointed out that Wakefield's sources were incomparable and thus led to unnoteworthy findings. Despite not piquing the interests of other researchers, Wakefield got the attention of Michael Barr and Jackie Fletcher. Barr, at the time, legally represented Fletcher and the organization JABS, a small group of UK parents who believed the MMR vaccine caused their child's autism. In February 1996, Wakefield accepted an $800,000 deal to conduct research to be used in Barr's legal case suing MMR vaccine companies. In order to hide the origin of his funding, the money was transferred to a special trustee fund at the Royal Free Medical School where Wakefield worked. The funding was then provided to Wakefield from the trustee fund, thus laundering and publicly hiding his conflict of interest. Barr set out a goal for Wakefield to develop research stating a time frame between vaccination and the onset of autistic traits, evidence that the vaccine caused autism, and a proposed mechanism for how the vaccine did so. Wakefield published his end of the deal in February 1998 with a 6-page study surveying the parents of 12 autistic children. All participants of the study were members of JABS, so the study's selection was already incredibly biased. 7 out of the 11 individual parents reported believing the MMR vaccine caused their child's autism. Notice I said 7 out of 11 parents? You see, one parent was interviewed twice because both of her sons participated in the study. All parents claimed their child started showing symptoms of autism within 14 days of receiving their vaccine. One parent even claimed noticing symptoms within 24 hours. Wakefield goes on explaining that 11 out of the 12 children had colitis, as discovered through the various biopsies, colonoscopies, lumbar punctures, MRI scans, B12 investigations, electrocephalograms, blood, and urine tests the children had to take. Wakefield theorized that the colitis was caused by measles, which then caused autism. He called the new disorder autistic enterocolitis, claiming that the measles virus from the MMR vaccine would leak out from the gut and cause neurological damage. This breakthrough study was followed by a major press conference where Wakefield warned the public about the risk of the MMR vaccine. Wakefield advised parents to vaccinate for measles, mumps, and rubella separately rather than use the combined MMR vaccine to avoid the possibility of their child developing autism. Suspicious. Despite becoming a global sensation, sending many UK parents into a frenzy, Wakefield's findings continued to be scrutinized since he refused to accept funding for a larger study in 1999. In the months following the publication of the paper, MMR vaccination rates in the UK plummeted from 90% to 79.9%, with some areas of London falling to 58.8%. The plummet in vaccination rates led to a weakened herd immunity, putting unvaccinated children and people with autoimmune disorders who could not get the vaccine to higher risk. This eventually led to the death of a 13-year-old boy in 2006. This was the first death of measles in the UK in over 14 years, and it certainly would not be the last. All the attention on the MMR vaccine and Wakefield intrigued British journalist Brian Deer. With a history of exposing pharmaceutical and medical malpractice, Deer sensed something was up. After meeting and interviewing one of the parents from the study at a showing of the movie Hear the Silence, a docudrama depicting Wakefield's research, Deer recognized that the mother's account didn't match the study. The mother claimed the child started showing autistic symptoms 6 months after the vaccination. This did not line up with Wakefield's paper. Through his investigation, Deer uncovered Wakefield's funding from Barr and a secret patent for a measles vaccine that Wakefield was developing during the study. This explains why he advocated for parents to vaccinate for measles, mumps, and rubella separately rather than not vaccinate at all. Upon finding out this conflict of interest, 10 of the co-authors of the study retracted their authorship in March 2004. However, Wakefield would continue to stand firmly with his work. In January 2005, Wakefield sued Deer for libel for publishing his findings. Due to Britain's Freedom of Information Act, Wakefield was required to provide all relevant paperwork to Deer and the court, which meant Deer received full access to unredacted reports and data from the study. After handing over the paperwork, Wakefield dropped the case. Within these files, Deer uncovered the biased selection of the study participants from jabs. 2 of the children in the study didn't even have autism. Many of the parents reported noticing autistic traits in their child months after vaccination, but Wakefield changed all of their answers to be within that 2-week time frame. All testing done on the children had come back negative and had no traces of measles. This evidence was fabricated with contaminated results. The raw data in PCR reports showed that blood from the same child would test both positive and negative. Autistic enterocolitis was a complete lie. Wakefield had not received approval from the hospital's ethics committee to perform the test on the children in his study. The tests, which were performed within 6 days, were described as unconventional and intense, even for adults, by hospital staff. The tests, once again, were biopsies, colonoscopies, lumbar punctures, MRI scans, B12 investigations, electrocephalograms, blood and urine tests. Without approval from the ethics committee, and tests which were unnecessary since none of the children had a previous history of bowel issues requiring this level of care, blatantly shows the disregard for the health, safety, and care of the children in the study. Colonoscopies can be extremely dangerous to perform on children due to the smaller size in their intestines and bowels compared to adults. In fact, child 2's bowels were perforated in 12 places during an endoscopy during the study. After an intense day of testing, the mother of child 4 recalled her son collapsing in the hospital hallway. He collapsed in the corridor. There was nobody around, and I was trying to get back to the lifts. He was walking along, and all of a sudden, just collapsed. There was nobody around, and I couldn't get any help. I was panicking a bit, and then, I can't remember how much further, He collapsed again. After returning home from testing, Child 5 was in such bad condition he was taken to a local hospital for 2 days observation. The labor-intensive medical testing, which is exhaustive to perform on adults, let alone autistic children, was unethical, unnecessary, and, in my opinion, abusive. These children suffered for the sake of Barr's and Wakefield's greed. With all of this information coming to light, the General Medical Council revoked Wakefield's medical license and redacted the study in 2010. The 3-year case revealed the truth to the British public, and MMR vaccination rates slowly returned to normal. However, the case fiercely ignited an anti-vax community. Supporters of Wakefield proclaimed the trial and Deer's reports to be a witch hunt and a hit by Big Pharma. Despite Wakefield's lies, people clung to them, desperate for answers. When MMR couldn't come to their rescue, they looked elsewhere. The next most popular theory about vaccines causes autism starts with New Jersey Congressman Frank Pallone. An avid environmentalist, Pallone proposed and passed an FDA amendment requiring the FDA to create a list of all drugs and foods containing mercury and their dosage. By 1999, the FDA completed their list, and it raised some concerns. You see, at the time, vaccines contained a preservative known as thimerosal. If every vaccine contained thimerosal, a 6-month-old would have received up to 187.5 micrograms of ethyl mercury. For reference, a microgram is 1/millionth of a gram. At the time, there was no research to prove if this dosage of ethyl mercury was safe. It's also important to note that ethyl mercury is different from methyl mercury, which is known to cause nerve damage. Since there was no evidence to show that ethyl mercury was dangerous and no safety guidelines in place yet, this caused a weird ethical dilemma. Do we keep using thimerosal until we do more research, or should we remove it just in case? Due to the pressure from concerned consultants, the American Academy of Pediatrics rushed out a statement advising the delayment of hepatitis B vaccines to lower the amount of ethyl mercury a child could be exposed to. This confusing statement assured parents thimerosal was safe, but reducing it was probably safer. But there was also a known risk, so don't worry, thimerosal is going to be removed anyway, guys. Honestly, pretty confusing and making a big deal out of something when we don't even know if it's a problem yet. Now, you'd think deciding to remove thimerosal from all vaccines was a safe decision, right? Preventative care is good and we're watching out for our health and safety. But the FDA has actually dealt with a situation similar to this before, and unfortunately didn't learn its lesson. The American Society of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery reported 90% of women were happy with their results. However, in 1982, 3 major lawsuits started against silicone breast implant companies. The plaintiffs claimed to have muscle aches, joint pain, fatigue, and weakness after their surgery. One woman in the case, Maria Stern, received $2 million in the lawsuit, while Maria Hopkins received $7 million in her case. This information was concerning to FDA Commissioner Frank Kessler. In April 1992, Kessler banned silicone breast implants until research proved the product was safe. Women flocked to have their implants removed, and a new wave of lawsuits formed. Dow Corning, a silicone breast implant company, saw an increase from 200 lawsuits to 30,000 in 1 year. In 1994 and 1995, studies comparing women with implants to women without implants would find that silicone implants were safe and did not cause connective tissue disease. The lawsuits didn't end after this research, and companies would opt for settlements and in some cases bankruptcy. Despite the breast implant panic showing that precautionary measures caused people to freak out, the FDA still went through with removing thimerosal before doing any research. This would prove dangerous as the stakes were now much higher. In July of 2000, Sally Bernard and Lynn Redwood, a businesswoman and nurse practitioner respectively, submitted a paper to the journal Medical Hypothesis. suggesting that thimerosal may cause autism. After noticing similarities between symptoms of mercury poisoning and autism, the mothers believe there may be a link. Kind of connecting the dots like Wakefield did with Crohn's disease and measles. I bet that'll work out well this time. The two also founded the organization Sensible Action for Ending Mercury-Induced Neurological Disorders, Safe Mind, later that year. The medical hypothesis was a small paper, so the theory didn't travel much, until Mark and David Geyer conducted a study testing it. By analyzing the data from the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, a federal government owned by the FDA and CDC, the Geyers compared the number of reports of vaccine injury after a shot with and without thimerosal. However, this study too was fraught. You see, Mark Geyer was paid by this guy who you've probably never heard of. You know his name? Richard Barr. Richard Barr paid Mark Geyer to testify against MMR vaccines, and Geyer later published his own paper claiming MMR caused autism in 2003. They also later wrote a paper studying the effects of Lupron, a brand-named puberty blocker that reduces the production of testosterone. You see, the Geyers had not one but 2 patents on Lupron as a treatment for autism. If I had a nickel for every time Richard Barr paid a scientist to prove that MMR causes autism, and had a conflict of interest because of a patent, and lost their medical license, I'd have not one but 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right? The Geyers' methodology of examining the VAERS database proved flawed as well. VAERS is not a mandatory reporting system for vaccine injury, so the reports aren't fact-checked. VAERS also shows that children who have better access to healthcare and can attend the doctor are more likely to receive their shots and receive quality testing in healthcare, leading to a higher chance of being tested for autism. Finally, the Geyers claimed kids were receiving more thimerosal than before, but by the publication of their study, thimerosal had been removed from all vaccines for 2 years. Geyers' reports on thimerosal excited the American people and impassioned politicians like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Major celebrities such as Jim Carrey and Jenny McCarthy would rally in support of thimerosal research. Autistic anti-vax conspiracies have now shifted from one vaccine to all vaccines cause autism. Despite Geyer's research being faulty, research showing thimerosal is safe and autism diagnoses continuing to rise after the substance's removal, anti-vax conspiracies continue to blame thimerosal for years to come. Even though thimerosal has generally left Americans' consciousness today, the idea that all vaccines cause autism and general vaccine hesitancy is prevalent. The narrative of exactly what in vaccines cause autism shifts every so often and frequently bleeds into distrust of medicine as a whole. Nevertheless, the conspiracy lives on. Whoa, that was a lot, guys. Whoa, that's really messed up and fucked up shit. Wait, hold on. There's more there. Hold on. There can't be more. That has to be the end. There's not more.
God help us lose our minds. These stupid people, help us understand what's the matter with you.
How we talk about the conspiracy that vaccines cause autism matters more than whether or not they actually do cause autism. They don't, but we're way past that point. I didn't tell you the history of anti-vax conspiracies just now because I want to prove to you that vaccines don't cause autism. I told you because it's a history centered around parents desperate enough to cure their children that they continuously get taken advantage of. The way Wakefield and the Geyers disregard providing quality care and science for the sake of glory and money is disgusting. It's difficult to process how the conspiracy as a whole is ableist without acknowledging that the evidence blatantly hurts those involved in it. So, with that being said, how do anti-vaxxers talk about autism and autistic people? And how do non-believers talk about the conspiracy as well? Robert F. Kennedy, avid anti-vax politician, states in an interview with Don Imus, "You see, what autism does to people's lives, it shatters the entire family. It destroys them. These kids are perfectly healthy, wonderful children. And then the kid just disappears. This child who was a complete human being just disappears. He stops talking. He starts banging his head against the wall. He starts biting himself. He stops interacting with his siblings. And these people know this, and they are continuing to inject children with this horrible, horrible toxin." Kennedy spreads the idea that autism kills the person they once were and replaces them. Kennedy also notes that the child was complete before and now is somehow lesser. Autistic people are not incomplete. Autistic people and their experiences are not lesser than others. There is nothing missing from an autistic person's life. During Jenny McCarthy's infamous Oprah interview in 2007, the star describes watching the soul leave her son's eyes after he received the MMR vaccine. Through many media interviews, McCarthy spread the belief that her son and other autistic children were polluted and poisoned with mercury and other toxins. The light went out, and I saw this beautiful soul that was struggling. The sentiment has since been repeated and spread by other anti-vaxxers. When asked about choosing not to vaccinate her daughter, Missy Foster tearfully replied, "Do you want to wake up one morning and the light is gone from her eyes with autism or something?" The power of McCarthy's antidote has spread to the average person and demonstrates the misconception that one becomes autistic. There is no turning point where someone suddenly becomes autistic. They have always been that way. You may not have noticed the signs until now. The rhetoric of the light leaving the person's eyes also perpetuates the notion that autistic people are always unemotional and robotic. Some autistic people may be less emotive, but that is not the case for everyone. Some people may even be overtly emotive. Regardless, the sentiment of the light leaving a person's eyes to show that they've become autistic portrays autism as death to the person they once were. Autism is not a death sentence. Autistic people can and do live fulfilling lives. McCarthy, like many anti-vaxxers at the time, argued that autistic people were polluted by toxins in vaccines and thus needed to be cleansed. Treatment to remove the heavy metals would then cause the behavior that you call autism to disappear, according to McCarthy. By focusing on toxins in vaccines, children with autism are seen by the opponents of childhood vaccines as victims of mercury pollution. This idea of being polluted adds another layer to disability. You're not just disabled, but impure and can be cleansed and cured. Bringing the idea of toxins and pollution furthers the belief that able-bodied people are healthier, natural, and superior. Further stigmatizing autistic people through the idea of vaccines as a pollutant, anti-vaxxers often seek out cures and treatments for autism. Detox treatments such as chelation therapy, casein and gluten-free diets, and rigorous regimens of vitamin and mineral supplementation all supposedly alleviate autistic behavior as the metals leave the person's body. These treatments measure healing through masking autistic behavior and being normal. Assertions that autism can and must be cured creates unrealistic expectations, promote the exploitation of parents made desperate by dire predictions, and perpetuate a climate of negative judgment towards children and adults who are not or do not strive to become indistinguishable from their peers, those who look and behave like the autistic people they are, says Kathleen Seidel, an autism rights advocate. Through seeking cures and treatments, we show that we do not value autistic people and their experiences and create a more hostile environment for those unable or unwilling to mask. Nor should an autistic person be forced to assimilate into non-autistic society in order to be accepted. Jim Sinclair, another autistic advocate, states, "When parents say, 'I wish my child did not have autism,' what they're really saying is, 'I wish the autistic child I have did not exist, and I had a different non-autistic child instead.'" This is what we hear when you mourn over our existence. This is what we hear when you pray for a cure. We demonstrate a desire to replace and eradicate autistic people by seeking cures and treatment. We disregard our autistic loved ones and their existence. Dubbed a national shame by the anti-vax organization Put Children First, autism diagnoses have increased. Now, this isn't from vaccines or some other pollutant, but simply better access to healthcare and more awareness. Groups that have consistently been underdiagnosed, such as women and people of color, have started to get more attention from the medical industry as we broaden the definition of autism and notice previous blind spots. As healthcare becomes more accessible to people, the diagnosis criteria changes, and people become more educated about autism, it is natural that more people will be tested and find out they are autistic. Trying to blame this increase on vaccines ignores the progress that has been made in the medical industry to better help women and people of color. We must consider the negative impact on autistic citizens of the popular practice of referring to autism as an epidemic, a tragedy, a plague, a devastating scourge, a catastrophe, or a demon, of the use of military metaphors such as killing, attacking, or defeating autism, and description of autistic children as prisoners of war, of comparison of autism with degenerative diseases such as cancer and diabetes, of the use of verbs such as fester to describe the autistic pattern of human development. Seidel demonstrates how vocal anti-vaxxers don't think of the repercussions of their actions on autistic people and their families in a letter to David Kirby, anti-vax author. I want to encourage you to consider how it feels for an autistic person to hear incessant, gruesome, emotionally charged descriptions of autism by non-autistic individuals who regard autism as an unmitigated tragedy, completely unacceptable, that insist that an autistic person's experience of the world is a consequence of poisoning, and whose cognitive and behavioral peculiarities are worthy of total eradication. I hope that you will consider when you make public statements about autism, you are presuming to speak for an entire class of people who are autistic for life, not simply the subset of parents and minor children with whom you have become acquainted with over the past years. For every parent eager to recover their child and lose the diagnosis, there are autistic citizens who will always have the diagnosis and will always wear the label, and who are affected by the manner in which the label is bandied about by those who hate what it represents to them. People too often talk about autism as if it is separate from autistic people. It is not. And those autistic people and their families, autistic children, the autistic spectrum adults, whose very existence you have questioned, and families like mine will still be around, still dealing with the stigma of contamination that you have helped promulgate. Striving for cures and recovery ignores the real needs of autistic people and drowns out their voices in the important conversations about those needs. The anti-vax movement forgets about and leaves behind the autistic people they cannot cure, having created a world more hostile for them to live in. And how do people respond to anti-vax rhetoric? Usually you just say, vaccines don't cause autism, and leave it at that. But what's left out of the conversation is that autism is not bad. Responding to fear-mongering without trying to address the demonization of autism leaves the issue unaddressed. Because instead of pointing out, hey, autism and neurodiversity are far from the worst thing that could happen to a parent, vaccines don't cause autism falls into the same narrative as vaccines cause autism. Both suggest that autism is a boogeyman that lives under our kids' beds that could strike at any time. You're validating the anti-vaxxers' ableist views by not challenging them. When having this conversation, you need to address that autism isn't a curse or some personal tragedy. Autism is not the death of the child you wish you had, but the birth of the child you do have. You must celebrate and cherish that. So, yeah, anti-vax conspiracies spread ableist rhetoric about autism and autistic people, but does this just exist theoretically in a vacuum? Only one of those articles was written by an autistic person, so how do autistic people actually feel about it? What ways can we see how the spread of those theories affect autistic people and their lives? Studies estimate that 30 to 50% of parents of autistic children believe that vaccines may contribute to their child's autism. A 2018 study compared the vaccination rates between autistic children and autistic children. That means someone without autism. The more you know. The study found that 81.6% of autistic children compared to 94.1% of autistic children received all the recommended shots between the ages of 4 and 6. The study also looked into the vaccination rates of younger siblings of autistic and autistic children. 8.3% of siblings of autistic children did not receive all of their recommended shots during the ages 1 and 11 months. 1.5% of siblings of autistic children did not receive their shots. This disparity in vaccination rates puts more autistic people and the people in their lives at risk of preventable diseases. In fact, a 2015 study found that autistic children were 33% more likely to be hospitalized than autistic children without chronic conditions. The study found that autistic children were more likely to be admitted due to preventable causes, including vaccine preventable diseases. These studies show that the anti-vax beliefs, specifically beliefs held by parents of autistic children, put autistic people in danger of disease and even death. In the article describing how the anti-vax movement affects autistic people, Emerson Sloka describes feeling the anti-vax movement vilifies me and treats me as a statistic rather than as a person. Given the pre-existing stigma against autistic people, this movement only helps to promote false information about us, information that is used to objectify us. This was one of the few articles I found of an autistic person talking about how anti-vax conspiracy theories have personally affected them. Due to the lack of literature on this topic, I set out and conducted my own survey to get some answers. For the record, this survey is informal and unscientific. This evidence is purely anecdotal and does not reflect the feelings of every autistic person. I bring forth this evidence in hopes of the personal stories of those interviewed will resonate with you and challenge you to consider this situation from an autistic point of view. I conducted this survey through the internet, reaching out to various online communities on Tumblr, TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, and people I knew in real life. I interviewed both autistic people and some anti-vaxxers to better understand their relationship with each other. In total, I got 38 responses. However, some of them were blank or trolls, so the total of real meaningful responses is 30. Shout out to Vaccines Don't Cause Autism. You filled out every one of my questions with the response, Vaccines Don't Cause Autism. Thanks for letting me know. Your responses were very helpful. Considering I'm just some guy, 30 responses is pretty good, but it's a quite limited sample size. My survey Also did not ask for participants to identify what their social, sensory, or comorbid needs were, nor did I ask the gender, age, or race of participants. I felt those things were personal and would cause the survey to grow beyond the scope of my capabilities. Because of this choice, I do not know if I got a diverse set of participants that could better show the reality of the autistic community. I also cannot conclude if these issues are more or less prevalent to affect certain groups of people. Once again, all these responses are informal and inconclusive when looking at the autistic community as a whole. I'm not a scientist. Some real scientists would have to go and find these real answers, which I don't have. With that out of the way, here are some of the responses from my survey. 27 out of 30 participants were autistic or expressed they were possibly autistic and looking to be tested. The three allistic participants were people who believe vaccines cause autism, so the responses were still informative. I first asked the autistic participants if they had any people in their life who believed vaccines cause autism. 11 out of the 27 autistic people surveyed stated that they knew someone who believed vaccines cause autism. Participants 1 and 14, both who don't have anti-vaxxers in their life, expressed discomfort when meeting or at the prospect of meeting someone who is anti-vax. Participant 1 stated, meeting someone who believes vaccines cause autism makes me uncomfortable because I then perceive their words as seeing autism as a problem. Participant 15 stated, it made me kind of scared. Others would assume that I should be cured or fixed rather than embraced for who I am. I have faced a lot of prejudice from partners and friends because of my own autism, simply because my brain works differently than theirs. And in some situations, because of that, I've faced violence. My worry about people who aren't educated on autism and how its occurrence has nothing to do with whether or not someone is vaccinated is that they will become scared. Oftentimes, when someone has no understanding of something, they become scared and they become violent. And with children being born to people like this and having the possibility of being autistic, I worry about what their parents might do to them. I've already heard stories of parents having killed or trying to kill their children because they are autistic. This, unfortunately, is true. There have been multiple cases of parents murdering their autistic child, claiming the stresses of raising an autistic child push them to murder. The book Autism's False Prophets has some good sections about this if you want to learn more. The 11 people who did have anti-vax people in their lives detail their relationships with that person or persons and how anti-vax beliefs have impacted their relationship. Many participants also included how they feel anti-vax believers view and treat autistic people. Once again, participants expressed feelings of discomfort and disrespect from anti-vaxxers. Participant 14 stated, the way I truly see it, myself, is that they would rather me be dead than be autistic. Participant 37 also expressed similar feelings. I feel like they feel I don't deserve to be alive. That people think death is better than existing as I do. Next, some participants recounted feeling unheard, hurt, or unable to be themselves around anti-vax people in their life. Participant 31 stated, I can't seem to take myself seriously because they believe my disability / neurodivergence is a disease or something that was caused. It shows that they have no respect for me, nor do they want to accept me. They see my existence as just a symptom of medicine they don't believe in. It's worse when I try to educate them, but they refuse to listen. They are not just hurting me, but so many others as well by believing and spreading this misinformation. Participant 12 said, anti-vax conspiracies hasn't distanced me from certain family members 100%, as some of them are close family members that I still see from time to time, but I do feel more closed off around them, and I definitely don't talk about being autistic around them. I don't feel like I can express myself freely. I definitely mask more around these people. Participant 32 said, I don't talk to them much anymore. Autism isn't a bad thing, it's just different. And for whatever reason, being different scares neurotypical people. If you hate autistic people so much, then you don't deserve to have me in your life. And that brings us to participants who have had more difficult relationships with people in their lives who believe vaccines cause autism. Some respondents even reported having to cut out family members or friends who had anti-vax beliefs. Participant 10 responded, "Anti-vax conspiracies reinforced my decision to be estranged from certain people in my life." Participant 31 expressed how anti-vax views impacted how their mother viewed them and created some difficulties in their relationship. Growing up, while I wasn't aware of it, the misconception and harmful idea that vaccination caused autism definitely affected how my mom perceived me during childhood. When I was first diagnosed at age 9, I was diagnosed with Asperger's, an outdated and incorrect medical term, to which my mom was very distraught. We both denied there was anything wrong with me, but it didn't change the fact that I was, in fact, autistic. Speaking to her years later, as I educated myself on the anti-vaxxers issue, I shared with her that people believed vaccines cause autism. She looked at me strange and went, "Well, yeah, because they do." I never know my mom believed this. She explained to me that when I was little, around the age of 2, she put me in this trial for some newer vaccines. I didn't know entirely why, but she said that was what caused my autism. She didn't believe I was born with it. It took me a long time to even get her to trust me or believe me about the truth about vaccines causing autism. I do hope that she believes me though. I doubt it. I just know that she definitely looked at me and my childhood and believed my experience to be the cause of medicine, not just something I was born as. Finally, participant 19 shared, "I have grown to hate them a lot. It's really offensive to me that they believe this sort of thing when it's simply just not right. I do have a very distant relationship with the people who believe vaccines cause autism. For example, my grandmother is one of those people. I've stopped maintaining the relationship as a whole because I don't want to entertain those ideals. Family or not, it had put a huge hole in our relationship. It is definitely very hard to maintain them at all when someone has beliefs that are just casually against who you are and morally wrong." The respondents to my survey show how believing that a person's experience is a cause of medicine and something to be fixed damages your relationship with that person. The 3 autistic anti-vaxxers who took my survey all responded that they did know autistic people and that it hasn't impacted their relationship. I do not know these participants personally. I do not know the autistic people in their lives. I cannot say whether or not that is true. However, the responses from the autistic people in my survey lead me to suspect that that may not be the case. Perhaps they are not seeing the way their autistic beliefs affect the autistic people in their life. Or maybe they do have a good relationship, unimpacted by anti-vax views. I do not know. That is a flaw and gap in my survey. Next, I asked participants how anti-vax beliefs may have impacted their view of themselves. Many people said feeling self-doubt and feeling broken and burdensome because of anti-vax beliefs. Participant 32 responded, "Every time I see someone online ranting about how vaccines cause autism, I pause for a second and just kind of wonder, is what I am so bad that these people refuse to give their kids medical care on the off chance that they will end up like me? It's disheartening to say the least. I used to spend hours trying to figure out why they're so scared of this, and then I realized it's because they don't want to put in the extra work of raising an autistic child. Depending on the social, sensory, and comorbid needs of an autistic person, raising an autistic child can be difficult, and unfortunately our society doesn't offer a lot of help and support for that. Though the participant didn't directly state this, I suspect this may be connected to how other autistic people feel unloved and burdensome to their families. Yes, being autistic may mean there are certain accommodations you need, and that is extra work for a parent. But if you are loved, you are worthy of that work. Remembering what foods cause sensory issues, or communicating more clearly, shows you are loved and worth the effort. Seeing parents, whether it be your own or strangers, Fear the prospect of the effort required to properly love you is damaging. Other participants went into further detail about the feeling of being a burden because of these thoughts. Participant 10 stated, the feeling of being broken came because of Autism Speaks Foundation, where they pushed the idea heavily that I was a puzzle to be solved and not whole. I had to go to therapy to get over it. Participant 33 shared, the conspiracies make me feel less worthy as a human being because some people would rather let their children catch or die of preventable diseases to avoid the slightest chance of them somehow ending up like me. Anti-vax conspiracies make it seem like being autistic is the worst thing that could happen to a child, and that makes me feel like a burden. Some participants also expressed feelings of imposter syndrome and second-guessing whether vaccines did cause their autism. Participant 18 said, it's caused some issues with people not taking me seriously and getting lack of proper treatment, but overall it's fine. The vaccine causing autism conspiracy has caused issues with misinformation being spread, making me doubt myself even though I'm fully aware I was born with autism. The anti-vax conspiracies affected the information about autism in the medical field, thus it caused me to doubt myself and second-guess my autism. It made me wonder if I was a byproduct of a vaccine rather than just being a part of who I am. Thankfully, as I was educated and continued to educate myself, that part of my imposter syndrome experience faded, as I now know how untrue that is, and that I have always been autistic. Nothing caused it or changed me. I am who I am, said participant 31. Participant 19 shared, I've been proud of myself still, but sometimes I start to dislike myself and wonder why I am like this. It's been a hard journey. While conducting this survey, I found and met an interesting and initially unexpected demographic, people who are both autistic and believe vaccines cause autism. The people I interviewed believe vaccines cause autism to varying degrees, each had a unique perspective on the topic. I originally did not expect to find people who met both qualifications for my survey. However, after meeting multiple people who did and thinking it over, I realized this may actually be semi-common. Considering how prevalent anti-vax conspiracies are, and how many people who believe and advocate that vaccines cause autism are the parents of autistic children, and how many of the other autistic people I interviewed knew people who were anti-vax, it makes sense that some autistic people may end up also believing this. The people I surveyed had complicated feelings on both anti-vax beliefs and autism. Some of them did feel broken and like a victim of Big Pharma because they were vaccinated and now have autism. Participant 36 said, I feel a lot more broken and defective and worry about past thimerosal containing vaccines I received. Participant 4 also had similar feelings. I believe the vaccine themselves do not cause autism specifically, but I also do not rule out the idea that large quantities of vaccines at one time may cause small neurological changes to occur in certain people. I developed severe paranoia surrounding vaccines for a while. My worldview was deeply affected for a long time, but I feel I have come around to a better state of mind. This belief, especially with the new idea of Tylenol causing autism when taken by pregnant mothers, has occasionally led me to see myself as a victim of a greedy system, or that all my eccentricities are nothing to be proud of and were a mistake. Participant 4 later shared, my mother said that she had read it could potentially worsen autism in kids who get it. That was over 10 years ago. At this time in my life, I, like any other kid, was putting a lot of trust into what my mother would research and inform me about, since I was not mature enough to question her sources. I grew up with the notion that vaccines could have played a role into autism, and mainly for people on the severe end of the spectrum. Today, I still find myself being skeptical about the topic on occasion and what it could mean for me. At the same time, I do wonder how much of the information my parents looked into had any real credibility or works cited. Part of me thinks not all of it did, and could have been skewed by the authors. One thing I was very naive to beforehand was the amount of people who rely on the internet for all of their common knowledge, especially medically. With some losing trust in their doctors and how many people are susceptible to being conditioned by the information for the worst. When considering how the corruption of a system could have led to others and I developing autism, it angers me and leads me to some degree of self-hate and resentment combined with the social failure I have experienced with people around. There have been plenty of days in my life where I've thought about the negatives that autism carries and how limited it has made my social life, with the vaccine belief mixed in. Sometimes I worry that I will never find real fulfillment in my life because of it, and because of a system that does not care in my mind. Some believe that vaccines may not have caused their autism, but are a possible factor in it. Participant 24 shared, I have found myself frustrated by those who assume that if some cases of ASD may be caused by vaccines, then they all are, and that's it. Autistic traits obviously run in my family. I do wonder now if vaccinations compound things given how sensitive I am to drugs, though not to illness. But it's not important, and of course there's no way of knowing, and it makes no difference. A couple of them also admitted to being skeptical of doctors and unsure how to handle those feelings. Participant 36 also said, I also worry I trust doctors and medical personnel less and feel more alone in the world. But they are still proud to be autistic and don't like how many anti-vaxxers talk about autism in ableist ways. Participant 11 said, I don't like how anti-vaxxers make autism out to be a bad thing. It's not bad, just makes you different. But the vaccines don't cause autism. They cause symptoms of autism, which in turn makes them be misdiagnosed. Participant 4 said, in terms of how others have treated me regarding this topic, I have not faced any real criticism or cruelty from people who believe vaccines are a cause specifically, but they do seem to pity us more than those who do not believe it. They pity us in that we are the result of a system that worries more about profit than it does about keeping a stable society. Even without any mistreatment over the vaccine autism notion, it still bothers me how there is a crowd that looks down on autism as something that should be fixed and eradicated. I also see it as a gateway train of thought that can lead to other types of ableism, racism, anti-Semitism, and other fringe viewpoints depending on how far the person goes. Some even spoke about trying to unlearn this and how they've grown from this, but still can't shake the belief. Talking to them was eye-opening. Interviewing and learning from them shows the diversity in opinion in the autistic community. Though they may be within the anti-vax movement, they still acknowledge how it has harmed them. Considering how prevalent it appears that anti-vax beliefs negatively affect autistic people's relationships and mental health, what can we do? How do we help support autistic people who are struggling with the effects of the anti-vax movement? Many of the people I surveyed and I agreed on the importance of surrounding yourself with other autistic people and celebrating autistic joy. There are millions of people who relate to you, and many of those around you are possibly neurodivergent and haven't realized it yet. It doesn't matter if vaccines do cause autism, because autism is not a curse. The hardest part of having autism is how other people treat you because of it. So you have to make sure you love your whole autistic self. Seek positive affirmation from supportive family, friends, and other autistic people. Find welcoming autistic communities, whether in person or online. Know you aren't alone. You are worthy. You are not a burden. Keep going and keep fighting. I'm autistic. I was diagnosed last summer, so relatively late. My whole life before diagnosis, I felt that something was wrong with me. I didn't understand how my peers talked, and didn't make any real friends until 8th grade. It was so isolating to be surrounded by people who I didn't understand and refused to try and understand me. When I was 11, I remember being bullied by kids for my social ineptitude and deeply internalized and agreed with them. Of course I deserved to be treated like shit and called names and excluded because I didn't understand social cues. Kids hate me and they're so right for it. I even had teachers who disliked me and would humiliate me in front of class for misreading social cues. I was punished for repeating sounds and words, echolalia, a common autistic trait, and would sob profusely, not understanding what I did wrong. People were so unwilling to calmly explain social cues or accept my stimming that I, like many autistic people, started to hide and hate them. I've slowly been embracing and becoming more comfortable showing my autistic traits to my closest friends. Sometimes I still get embarrassed just existing when I'm alone. It's weird and hard to start loving something about yourself when everyone, including yourself, hate you for it. Unlike the people I surveyed, I'm lucky that no one in my immediate family believes vaccines cause autism. I have some distant relatives that do, but we only see them once a year, and I've never personally spoken to them. I'm fortunate to not have had anti-vax conspiracies also fuel my self-loathing for my autistic traits. I'm fortunate to have had autistic friends both before and after my diagnosis who could reassure me that there was nothing wrong with me for showing my autistic traits. But as my survey showed, not everyone is that lucky, and many autistic people do feel the effects of anti-vax conspiracies. Whether it be the conspiracies causing a hatred or fear of their own autism or destroying a relationship with a family member, autistic people are deeply negatively affected by them. When you already have the whole world against you, built upon ableism and a disregard for your being, having close people in your life believing conspiracies that you are broken and damaged furthers an autistic person's internalized ableism.
I don't mind some slight disorder. Pull up the roots, pull up the roots. I know every living creature. Pull up the roots, pull up the roots.
The history of the origins of the conspiracy that vaccines cause autism is rife with greed and a disregard for the safety and care of autistic people. The way anti-vaxxers talk about their own autistic children and patients dehumanize them and paints them as damaged goods rather than loved ones. Though many anti-vaxxers claim to care about the well-being of autistic people, their language and actions often put them at a higher risk of unvaccination and thus preventable disease. My own personal study demonstrates anecdotal evidence of how autistic people feel unloved, broken, and burdensome. Not every autistic people may feel harmed or broken by anti-vax theories, but when an autistic person has close family or friends that are anti-vax, they seem more likely to feel that way. Think about the people you love and how the things you say and do affect them. I know you may not care what a stranger on the internet like me feels, but you do care about the people in your life. One day you may have an autistic child, or partner, or friend. The people in your life may already be autistic and you just don't know it yet. I know you want to protect them and believe you are doing what's right. You are doing your best, but sometimes your best can still hurt people. Your best can lead to seriously damaging those relationships. Please consider how your beliefs affect those you love and care about. Your anger and advocacy is still needed by the autistic community. You can put your anger and care into different, healthier, more beneficial places. We still need your advocacy for better accommodations in schools, workplaces, healthcare, marriage equality, and more. Get mad that the person you love is not treated equally by society. Get mad and stop waiting for your child to not be autistic anymore. Get mad that others think they need to be cured. Get mad and do something about it. Don't mourn for us. We are alive. And we're here, waiting for you.